Long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Jokey. As always, I am joined by my co-host, Jack McCurry. How you doing, Jack?
Doing good. From the last time we talked, which is when we sat down with Mark, there has been a lot of movement around the National Football League, and now we sit here and the Browns are the last team standing looking for a head coach.
Yeah, there definitely has been a lot of movement, and we'll definitely be sure to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit of draft today, but you mentioned the movement, so let's start with that. The first, Dallas Cowboys fired Jason Garrett, then hired Mike McCarthy. They had also interviewed Marvin Lewis to fulfill the Rooney Rule, so they settled with going with McCarthy. Today, the New York Giants hired Patriots special teams coordinator Joe Judge. The Carolina Panthers hired Matt Rule, giving him a 7-year, $60 million contract where it could be worth upwards to $70 million. And the Redskins hired Ron Rivera, which we were pretty sure that was going to happen when we talked with Mark last. Jack, when you look at those four coaching moves, and I think that McCarthy was the highest on the list for the Browns out of those four guys, which team made the best move by what coach they hired?
Well, the Rivera move happened like a week ago, but that was actually the best move, I think. The Redskins, when they moved on from Jay Gruden midway through the year, a lot was unknown of like what exactly they were going to do, but Dan Snyder finally stepped up and said he needed to take control of the football team. He got rid of President Bruce Allen, which was a great move because Allen was a terrible front office executive. Just made bad decision after bad decision, and got a guy like Ron Rivera in that's going to take command of that franchise. And they're already shaking things up. Like they got rid of the athletic trainer that was giving some problems. Trent Williams comes to mind the most. Like they are shaking up that organization. They're changing the culture, and adding a coach like Ron Rivera is really going to do that. I think that was the best move. I'm shocked that Mike McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys were a match. I don't think anyone's seen that coming until, the reports that Jerry Jones was looking strictly for an NFL experienced head coach. I mean, outside of Ron Rivera, Mike McCarthy was the best choice. I mean, he's got the Super Bowl ring, was a great coach for Green Bay. He's willing to adapt to the times with the use of analytics and changing up his offense. Right before we recorded, it's being reported that they're keeping Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. So, I mean, I think those two were great moves. Obviously, the Matt Rule hiring by Carolina is definitely going to be one to watch. With the amount of money they're paying him, it seems like he's got final say on roster moves and everything, which is very interesting for a coach that, turned over college programs but doesn't have a lot of NFL experience. And then with the Joe Judge hire, I mean, it's another Belichick disciple. Special teams coaches, you don't see them get NFL jobs too often, but you look at the coaches left standing in the playoffs. John Harbaugh was a special teams coach in Philadelphia before he took the Ravens job. So it has a history of proving to be successful, but the two moves that were made today are definitely going to be the questionable ones.
Yeah, Mike Tomlin was also a special teams coach too. So that's an interesting trend, I guess. You now have three head coaches that are special teams or that were special teams coordinators, and it just makes you wonder, what they see. Maybe they just have a little more free time throughout the week to really dive in and break down games in a different way, not being an offensive or defensive coordinator, and kind of get full experience of the true team and what's going on. The moves today, the Matt Rule one, that one really shocked me. I was pretty confident he was going to go to the Giants, but giving him 7 years, potentially $70 million, I think you're right that he'll definitely have the personnel moves being final say of that. It's interesting because the Panthers, have been a playoff team for so many years. There's a report that came out where they might trade Cam Newton, or they're going to explore that this offseason. They have a rookie quarterback that came in this year, did a decent job for them. I'm curious to see how this team is going to shape up because there's still a lot of that playoff experience on that team with guys like Christian McCaffrey and whatnot. So there's certainly talent there. You're going to have to wonder if they're going to be patient enough to go through a rebuild, if this is even going to be considered a rebuild for Carolina for that team. The Giants, for Joe Judge, is going to really be who he brings in at coordinators, especially working with Daniel Jones, who will be headed into his second year. I would imagine Eli is definitely leaving the franchise at this time, but they have so many holes that they need to fill, wide receiver, edge, just to name a couple. So they certainly have a lot of work to do, and I think it's going to really depend on the coordinators that Judge brings in. And Mike McCarthy in Dallas, I think that could be a really good fit. They talked about with McCarthy how he's kind of reinvented his offense, the things he's done to learn the college game, learning NFL in different ways, notice all the trends. And when you have a dynamic quarterback like Dak Prescott who can throw the ball really well and also run, you have a back like Ezekiel Elliott, a receiver like Amari Cooper, who they need to re-sign this offseason. When you have those three guys on offense, your offense can be really talented. So hopefully in Dallas they can piece things together and McCarthy can jump right in and get that Dallas offense rolling. They already have a great offensive line, so that's something that they don't have to worry about. It's just schematically piecing everything together and hopefully making the playoffs after missing out this year. So with the Browns, Jack, that leaves we're the only team right now without a head coach. And over the next 3 days, we have 3 different guys coming in to interview. We have Eagles defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz coming in tomorrow, which is Wednesday. We have Kevin Stefanski, the Vikings offensive coordinator, coming in on Thursday, which would be his 3rd interview with the Browns. He interviewed twice last year before they hired Freddie Kitchens. And on Friday, they will be bringing in Patriots offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels. Jack, when you look at the 3 guys that are coming in this week and who they've already interviewed, do you have a sense of who the favorite is for this job?
I still feel like it's Josh McDaniels' job to lose. And, what I say that, I mean, unless Schwartz or Stefanski, there's been reports that Robert Saleh had an impressive interview. Unless one of those guys blew the Haslams and DePodesta away, I still think Josh McDaniels is going to be the next head coach of the Cleveland Browns, barring something unforeseen, such as him choosing to go back to New England, or who knows what could happen. I still think it's McDaniels. The Jim Schwartz thing, when I first seen it, I thought, maybe he's going to be a defensive coordinator. Although right before we started recording, Ian Rappaport was on NFL Total Access, and he said that the Browns, he wouldn't consider McDaniels the favorite, and he made a strong case for Jim Schwartz, saying that Schwartz is into analytics. He commands a room. He's a leader. He's a disciplinary type coach. He obviously came from the Belichick tree. Maybe we are sleeping on Schwartz. I mean, everybody's going to look at his record with the Lions and say that that's going to be a terrible hire, and it very well may be. But people tend to forget he took over that team coming off an 0-16 season, and within a couple years, he had them in the playoffs. I'm not saying Schwartz is a guy that I want here as a head coach. I would definitely take him as a defensive coordinator because his scheme matches up with the personnel we currently have. But I wouldn't be surprised if Schwartz is in this. But at the end of the day and at the end of the week, I fully expect McDaniels to be the next coach of the Browns.
Yeah, I really think McDaniels is a favorite in this scenario that is currently presented to the Browns on who they're going to hire to be their head coach. The thing with Jim Schwartz and what makes it interesting is there's a report out there, Jack, that his contract ends within a couple weeks. So he could potentially make a lateral move to being a defensive coordinator for any team, including the Browns. So let's say the Browns hired Stefanski as a head coach or Josh McDaniels. Do you see it a likelihood that Jim Schwartz could be the defensive coordinator for this team?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with McDaniels, obviously that Belichick connection is there. With Stefanski, it's unknown, but he probably would like to have, some kind of veteran presence on the coaching staff to help guide him. Obviously Gary Kubiak's up there in Minnesota, and maybe he brings him along as an offensive coordinator if Mike Zimmer were to allow it. I mean, Kubiak, he has had a successful track record with offenses, and it seems like his presence has helped Stefanski this year in improving the Minnesota offense compared to what it was under DeFilippo before Stefanski took it over. I could easily see that, but I did see during the day, and I think it was Michael Kist who we had on, I think last year during our NFL preview, he got the sense that Schwartz wasn't prepared to leave Philadelphia just yet. So I don't know if he's ready to leave unless he gets a head coaching job. But I mean, if the opportunity is there to hire him as a defensive coordinator, I think it would be a great move by the Browns.
Yeah, I agree. And, there's talk that Jim Schwartz is also big into, quote, the analytics, like Kevin Stefanski, and that's why, Deep Podesta liked him so much going through that process last year. So there could be that connection there. Either who they hire, whether it is Stefanski, McDaniels, if you were to bring in Jim Schwartz as your offensive coordinator that's the start of a great coaching staff, I feel. And it could lead to some really good things. Just some statistics about the Eagles' defense this year. They were fourth in the NFL, allowing only 34% of conversions on third down, so they were able to get off the field. They ranked 10th in yards per game, 331 in the NFL. They were fifth in opposing quarterback completion percentage at 60.9%, and they were third in rushing yards per game at 90.1 yards given up on the ground per game. So they had a really good defense there. They just lost so much talent on offense that it was quite a miracle that they were able to finish 9-7, get to the playoffs, eventually losing to the Seahawks 17-9 this past weekend in the wild card weekend. So if they're able to bring him along as a defensive coordinator, I think it would be a great move for whichever head coach comes in. Let's talk about a couple of the other guys that have interviewed. Brian Dable interviewed yesterday for the position of head coach. I could kind of see, I'm not sure what his contract situation is, Jack, but I could also see him potentially maybe being an offensive coordinator / associate head coach if that's the route maybe Josh McDaniels will want to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's another guy that has worked under the Belichick coaching tree. I think he was in New England before he went to Alabama, or it was either before or after his stint in Alabama.
It was before.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I don't know what kind of relationship him and McDaniels have. And also, like you said, I don't know his contract status, but we would get the sense that McDaniels would probably call the plays here. So having someone help game plan, because clearly our last head coach didn't want to do that, if anybody has read any reports. But I'm sure McDaniels would like a helping hand and someone he's familiar with, and Dable would definitely fit that role.
There's also going around that the Browns have not allowed their assistant coaches, so Todd Monken, Steve Wilkes, or Mike Prefer, to interview for any type of other coordinator job. So as of right now, those three are still part of the Browns coaching staff. Jack, out of those three, do you see one or multiple of those guys sticking around next season for whoever the head coach is?
I would definitely think Mike Prefer will be here depending. Well, actually, with either. If it's McDaniels or Stefanski, I think Prefer's here because both have worked with him previously in other spots. McDaniels had Prefer as a special teams coach in Denver. And then when Prefer was in Minnesota, obviously Stefanski's been there a long time. So they have a working relationship as well. So with either one of the guys, I expect Mike Prefer to be here, or even if they go in another route. I mean, Prefer has been a successful special teams coach. He's done a great job here this year or this past season with the Browns. So I would fully expect him to definitely be back. But also they said that, they weren't letting some assistants interview or the entire coaching staff. Yesterday, Sirius XM reported that the Browns defensive line coach interviewed for a spot on the Falcons coaching staff and also is interviewing for the Cardinals. So they are letting some assistants go, but like you said, Monken, Wilkes, and Prefer are still on the staff as of now.
And to kind of wrap this all up, because we don't know, how this is going to shake out over the next few days, and we'll definitely be on to talk about that when it does. But every other team has made their coaching hire. I know the Minnesota Vikings could still make a change if they lose this weekend. There's been talk where they would fire Zimmer and maybe promote Stefanski to the role of head coach. I know the organization came out and said that they believe in Zimmer long term, so it remains to be seen if that's going to happen or not. But Jack, is it a bad thing that the Browns are the last team to hire their head coach, or are they in a really good situation because everybody else has their man and they're able to conduct all these interviews, and really the only one that they interviewed was Mike McCarthy. He took the job in Dallas, and all the rest of their candidates are available to be had.
Yeah, I think they're in a great spot. I mean, like you said, McCarthy's the only one off the board. All their guys are still available. Obviously, they didn't interview Judge. Rule declined to interview with us. And Rivera, we didn't even get the opportunity to interview. Am I missing another coaching job?
No, you're good.
But everybody's still available. Dable's available. Bieniemy. Obviously, they're interviewing. Salah's still available. They're interviewing Schwartz, Stefanski, and McDaniels this week. And according to reports, they want to have this wrapped up by Saturday, which tends to make me think that McDaniels is the guy, unless they reach an agreement with Stefanski and have to wait maybe one day, maybe have to wait a couple weeks, depending on how long the Vikings run goes. So I think the Browns are in a great spot. Their top two perceived guys are still available. And, they can take their time with this. I know some people are wanting them to rush things and wrap this up now that, McDaniels only has one spot he can go to. You don't have to rush it. You can, let McDaniels take his time. Obviously, Friday's going to be the day that we interview him. Maybe Friday comes and a deal's already set in stone. Or maybe the Browns are blown away by Schwartz or Stefanski in the next couple of days and they pick them as the next head coach. But the Browns don't seem to be in a hurry, and I think we all just need to relax and let it all play out.
And the other aspect of this is they said that they were going to hire a general manager after the head coaching search is done. And it makes you wonder, where they are in terms of prepping for free agency, prepping for the draft. But Elliot Wolf is still there, and you would think that right now he is kind of the driving force behind all that research right now, pretty much as a lone guy in the front office.
Yeah, I mean, the only downside to this stretching out is, the whole assembling the staff, the GM search, the Senior Bowl and the East-West Shrine game are a couple weeks away. The other downside to it is, you're starting to hear that assistant coaches are available. One name in mind is Kevin O'Connell, who the Redskins are allowing to explore other job opportunities. And I think Albert Breer reported that he's going wherever McDaniels is going. Well, there's only one place McDaniels can go unless he stays in New England, and that's the Cleveland Browns. And O'Connell would likely be the offensive coordinator, which makes a lot of sense given his work with quarterbacks. And obviously there's an affinity there between McDaniels and O'Connell. So you would like to get this done so that they can fill out their staff. There's a lot of assistant coaches available looking for work. And if McDaniels wants to put together the best staff possible, he might want to get a run on this and take the job now while he can.
Yeah, I would kind of think that he already has those people in mind. So if he does get hired Friday, Saturday by the Browns, that the coaching staff could come together really well. I did mention the draft, and we did finally get, I guess, our first big declaration, and that is that Alabama quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, which let's just state the fact that I pronounced that name correctly, or as close as it's going to get without stumbling through it. He announced that he's going to declare for the draft, and it could really impact the top 10 of this draft, because we got our, I guess, really first juicy draft rumor, and that is that the Lions are considering taking a quarterback at number 3. Jack, if the Lions take a quarterback at number 3, say they take Tua, how do you see that impacting what the Browns do at that 10th spot?
Oh, it could very well shake up the entire draft. I mean, right now you're looking at it, the Lions, if they don't take a quarterback, they're likely taking a offensive tackle. They could go on the defensive side of the ball just because that's Patricia's specialty. But if, like, say they go to a Tagovailoa and then they trade Matt Stafford to one of these teams below them that could use a quarterback, like, say, Miami or the Chargers or even the Las Vegas Raiders, which we got to get used to saying that now.
Or the Colts, maybe.
Yeah, the Colts. I mean, the Colts are another team. I mean, this could really shake up the draft. And, the Browns are right in the middle of all that. They have the 10th pick. And what you're hoping is that that 3 teams in front of them go quarterback, because it'll push some of the top talent down the board. We're in the market for offensive tackles. If, say, Derek Brown falls to 10, that could help the Browns. They don't really need a wide receiver, although, I mean, if you can get Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb alongside Beckham and Landry, would anybody really complain? Nah, at first, maybe, but at the end of the day, that would be an exciting offense. Or it could push Isaiah Simmons, who will probably be on the board at 10. Same with Grant Delpit, the safety out of LSU. But yeah, I mean, I hope another quarterback jumps up there and we get 4 in the top 9. That it would just make the Browns situation so much better.
Yeah, there's certainly the possibility of 4 quarterbacks going in the top 10. Jordan Love is another guy out of Utah State who could potentially go top 10. I did draft over on Draft Network as we kind of go along, Jack, and I want to read this off to you, and just to give you an idea of potentially how this shakes out if Tua were to go number 3. So you have Joe Burrow 1, Chase Young 2, Tua 3. I have the Giants taking Jeffrey Okudah 4, Miami taking Justin Herbert 5, with Tua being gone. The Chargers taking Jordan Love at 6. Derek Brown going to Carolina at 7. Andrew Thomas falling all the way to 8 to Arizona. Jerry Jeudy 9 to Jacksonville. And that would leave the Browns with the picks of Jedrick Wills, Tristan Wirfs, CeeDee Lamb, Isaiah Simmons, and Grant Delpit. Not all positions in need. They don't really need a wide receiver, but offensive tackle, linebacker, and safety with Wills, Wirfs, Simmons, and Delpit, I think that they would be sitting in a great position if they were to land any one of those 5 players.
Yeah, I mean, you have 2 of the top 3 offensive tackles in Wirfs and Wills, because you can rule out Alex Leatherwood now because he's going back to Alabama for his senior year. You get a linebacker in Isaiah Simmons, who was pretty damn good against Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl, as well as all year. It would definitely fill a need, because if we do lose Schobert, and we're projected that we would be cutting Kirksey this offseason, linebacker is a strong need. And yeah, like you said, wide receiver would be there. We don't really need a wide receiver, but that's something there on the board. But we would be in a great spot in your hypothetical mock draft right there.
Yeah, always know quarterbacks are prime position, so there certainly is that possibility where 4 could go in the top 10. I don't personally see it happening, but there always is that possibility with how quarterbacks are valued in today's NFL. So we have 4 months to see how this plays out, so there's plenty of time to discuss and break down the draft and whatnot. Jack, is there anything else you want to discuss before we get on out of here?
Well, I just wanted to touch on Tua real quick. Like, if you were a quarterback needy team, how much would the hip injury scare you, Anthony? Like, say you are the Miami Dolphins GM or the Chargers GM or even the Lions GM, and you have a decision to make on the future of your franchise and the quarterback position. Would you take the gamble on Tua, knowing what you know about the hip injury currently?
For me, that's a major red flag. Now, when you look at the team like the Miami Dolphins, who have 3 first-round picks, say they get a top player, maybe they take the top offensive tackle or top wide receiver with that first pick. And I know we're kind of getting into the draft with Baker Mayfield, where like take the running back and take whatever quarterback's left at 4. But if you're really scared about those medicals, there's a certain possibility that he could start to slip down the first round. And with the Dolphins' second pick being number 18, there's certainly the possibility that he could fall to that position. If not, they have the capital to move up and, get him around pick 10, 11, 12 or so, if they so wanted. So if I'm a team, I'm really worried about that hip. I would maybe look at one of the different quarterbacks. But if you're 100% confident in his medicals and your medical staff and whatnot, you got to take it. The Dolphins certainly need a quarterback, unless they're a team who, like I said, has three first-round picks. They could completely avoid taking a quarterback in the first round and shoot for Trevor Lawrence next year, who probably will be the number 1 pick going into next year. But with the Dolphins winning 5 games this year with a depleted roster, that would be a really big gamble to try and go get the quarterback next year, number 1.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it shocked me that his press conference, he was able to walk up there without a crutch or a cane or anything. I think that shows that he's really progressing nicely with the rehab and the recovery. Obviously, the combine's going to be a big thing because they poke and prod you to the ends of the earth when it comes to the medical. And I'm sure, the weeks after the combine, there'll be a lot more clarity. I don't know if I would take him right now. Ask me again in a month if I was a QB needed team, and I probably would, just because, before the injury, he was probably going to be the number 1 pick, despite Burrow's historic season that's not even over yet. But, I mean, Tua's definitely got all the tools to be a franchise quarterback. They're already comparing him to Drew Brees. Right now, I wouldn't take him that high. Now, if I was a team that had somebody in place, like, say, Carolina, for instance, if he were to fall there, I would take him and sit him behind Cam Newton for a year with a medical red shirt and then deal with the consequences later if something goes awry with his medical. But yeah, right now I definitely wouldn't take him. And yeah, like you said with Miami, for instance, I mean, do they take another gamble and bank on trying to get Trevor Lawrence next year, but like you said, they won 5 games with a depleted roster and Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback. It's tough to say if that's worth the gamble, just because Flores is going to get the most out of those players and win games, even though it might hurt them potentially if they were to go that route and tank for Trevor.
There could be 2 quarterbacks, veteran quarterbacks on the move this offseason. We touched on Stafford a little bit, but Cam Newton is also one who the Panthers have talked about possibly trading this offseason. So that certainly could also shake up the first half of the draft, and it'd be interesting to see what QB needy teams would jump at the opportunity to get one of those guys. Both injury history, so that would definitely play into it. But it would be a fun conversation to have to see what kind of return those 2 guys would get for their respective teams in terms of draft capital and whatnot.
And I'm glad you brought up Carolina again, because while we were recording, I seen a quote from Matt Rule. He was a big fan of Will Grier, and where's Will Grier at now? The Carolina Panthers. So if they do move on from Cam, maybe they don't draft a quarterback. Maybe they go 2020 and see what Will Grier has and see what Matt Rule can get out of him. And then if all else fails, they're in the market in 2021 for a Trevor Lawrence or a Justin Fields or whoever else could be available in that draft a year from now.
Yeah, like I said, we have 4 months to discuss all this, and we'll certainly go through every single scenario as we move towards the NFL draft. Jack, any parting words for tonight?
No, just hoping and praying for McDaniels, baby.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that one. So, as always, you guys can follow Jack on Twitter at JamieCurryCLE. Follow me on Twitter at Anthony Joki, Joki. Follow the podcast and the website at The Dogland on Twitter and on Facebook as well. You'll find our podcast on every platform that you listen podcasts on, including iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. With all that, we're going to get on out of here. We'll be back, I would tend to guess, Friday, Saturday night, Sunday, depending on when this head coaching thing shakes out. We'll definitely be on when that happens. So stay tuned. We have a lot planned for you in terms of draft talk, free agency, all that. But let's get through this coaching search first. And most importantly, go Browns.